Talking about Mr. Solomon, Lafe Soloman,
Who's that?
National Labor Relations Board.
NLRB.
And there's been a lot of things going on with the National Labor Relations Board. And there's been some, there's a
Are
huge...
you talking about normal things going on or some hanky-panky going on?
There's a huge fight now over these recess appointments. There are three people appointed, and the president appointed 3 people to the board. When he claims the Senate was in recess. The Senate says, no, we weren't in recess.
They were never in recess.
We had somebody there with a gavel.
Gaveling?
We were going through. So there weren't.
Isn't that when the president tried to appoint those people during the Christmas holiday? And now it turns out that those appointments shouldn't have been made because the Senate was never in recess. And if the Senate is not in recess, you can't appoint anyone to any government position of this level, especially the NLRB, unless they're approved by Congress. Isn't that correct?
Well, it was in January 2011. Maybe it was around New Year's. But anyway.
Yeah, it was New Year's.
But anyway, so that's now there's oral arguments were heard December 18th. We're going to see what happens. It's in court now, and we'll see what happens with these recess appointments. But what's interesting about it is now you have a completely liberal National Labor Relations Board board there, and very pro-union. So
when you say pro-union,
what happened?
What's the effect of that?
So what's actually happened is it's because there's been this pro-union takeover at kind of the higher levels. The states have been fighting back, and a lot of states have been passing right-to-work legislation.
What does right-to-work mean, Mark?
Right-to-work is, okay, let's say that I want to be a plumber or something like that, right?
Right.
Well, I can't work as a plumber unless I'm in the plumbers union, okay? And I can't be in the plumbers union unless I
pay dues.
Pay union dues, right? And that's well and fine as far as I'm concerned in the private sector. Now, in the public sector, I think it's a little unfair because that union dues is actually, taxpayer money, and then it goes to the union, which is usually pretty closely related to whoever's in politics, and the money kind of crosses.
Are you trying to tell me that politicians would encourage unions for all the workers in government because those union dues actually go back to the politicians in the name of lobbyists and elections?
Not only that,
campaign
contributions, demonstrations, having people show up, getting out the vote.
I mean, like the SEIU with their purple shirts.
But I mean, it's getting out the vote.
Yeah.
It's the getting out the vote machine. So basically what you have is a branch of the government using taxpayer money to get reelected. Large amount
on a complete returning basis.
Yeah, I mean a huge amount of taxpayer money is used to get out the vote for and there's a kind of incestuous cycle here where, people are, well, there was just a situation where someone wanted to be on a city council board as a union member, and they're working on their own contracts and that kind of thing. So there's a little bit of conflict of interest in some of these issues, and so I would say. But the right to work states, he talks even about private enterprise, okay?
Well, I understand that Michigan just had a vote, and it was overwhelmingly they voted for the right to work, and where they wanted to limit the union's ability to demand union dues. And part of right to work says, hey, I don't mind being part of a union, but you can't make me pay you every month. Or every paycheck.
Well, that's what they call free riders, because the union would say, look, well, I'm negotiating with you. We're using our union.
And we're negotiating for you.
On your behalf. We're using our union muscle.
Right.
You should support us. No, Missouri, Kentucky, Montana, Alaska, and Pennsylvania, these are all where there's going to be future right-to-work state fights. And so you kind of have this balance. The NLRB has been very... they said, okay, Boeing, you can't move to, I guess it was South Carolina.
Washington to South
Carolina, which is right-to-work state. So Boeing had to move back. I think the result of that was,
no, they were able to build a plant in South Carolina, but they still had to employ people in Washington.
Well, I mean, but I think that what happened, I think a lot of those contracts went to France to Airbus. Yeah. So what happened is, you're kind of fighting over this thing and saying, look, okay, you can't build this in South Carolina, but basically, it came to the advantage of France because they had the Airbus contract. So, but they did move it back to Washington, and a lot of people saw that as a little bit of a kind of a strong arm tactic, and so I think that really kind of started pushing these right-to-work states, where people said, "Look, this is, a little overplaying of the hand here."
Well, I do know that Boeing did make a decision to keep employment in Washington. They actually
Well,
hired.
they had to move back. Yeah.
But no, they didn't completely move back. They did move to South Carolina, but they didn't move the entire operation.
The 737, right?
Yeah,
The Dreamliner or whatever.
they still kept production in Washington to ensure Washington, which is not a right-to-work state.
Right.
So they split their employment between the two states is what they actually did. But
Washington is a right to smoke dope state. You can smoke marijuana.
They're smoking the weed there
Yeah,
now.
you can smoke marijuana.
But it's interesting that Michigan would vote for right to work because Michigan's the heart of the AFL-CIO and building the United Auto Workers and building cars, and that's a union stronghold. But to have the majority of the population in Michigan vote for the right to work, that should be telling the union something, that this is a trend. And you know that the trending on unions is actually going down.
Right.
The average worker used to be up to 30-some-odd% was union. Now it's down to right around 20% is union, and they see nothing but the trend going down. So they need.
Well, that's why they know. That's why they have to move into government.
That's why they've been moving into government.
And so now they control the government.
SEIU, the government workers, all of these unions in the government. And so who's doing the most hiring under this administration?
Well, the government is
hiring
ballooning.
the government employees. They're extremely bloated.
Right.
And what's interesting is the average government employee makes far more than the average private sector employee.
Yeah,
so now they're building a strength in the union in the government employees.
Well, like they say, workers' rights are human rights. And,
the worker rights are human rights.
And people voted for the American way, which is you are your brothers and sisters' keeper.
Right.
So that's the union,
union
way of looking at it. And the president didn't really talk much about Wisconsin right before the election.
No.
He was pretty quiet about that, but I don't think he'll be quiet out of the rest of these right-to-work
states.
Well,
he did stack the NLRB with a pro-union bunch.
Right.
And I do know that Trumka, the head of the AFL-CIO, was one of the major visitors to the White House during the first administration. So I believe that the union will increase their strength under the next 4 years of the president.
Right.
But the question is, will the people really want that to happen, or will there be these continuing right to works? As you know, Mark, Republican governors in the United States has gone up dramatically. So if a Republican governor and a Republican Senate in any given state decides they want to go right to work, it's not going to be California, but what happens if the shades of right-to-work states start overpowering the union, the union states? What do you think is going to happen?
Well,
are we going to have busting heads? What is going to happen?
I think the trend will be for more government. The government. If the union NLRB is pushing in the private enterprise, we'll see what happens on this case about the recess appointments. But if the union keeps pushing, that'll decrease investment in the private sector. Now, people aren't going to put money in the private sector. Less hiring, depress that sector. Those people, because they're going to be laid off or they can't find jobs, they're going to need food stamps, they're going to need social welfare. That'll increase the size of government.
But this is putting more people on the dole.
Well, that's exactly.
And the problem
that's a good thing, because you want to have basically, if everyone's on the dole, then the government's taking care of everyone.
Well, isn't there a tipping point at 50%? If over 50% of people on the dole, won't that demand that the next election, when people say what they're going to do for the people on the dole, whoever gives the most amount of money to the people that don't want to work, aren't they going to have the opportunity to win again in a landslide because, we want our free dollars? Now, I don't know, Mark. I've worked since I was at least 7 years old, one form or another. I believe work is a good thing. But this country seems to be evolving to a point where I think it's a good thing if you go to the mailbox and get a check.
Well, I think you've got a bad attitude.
I got a bad attitude.
You got a bad attitude because
I want to work.
What they've taught in schools for the last 25, 30 years is that the government's here to take care of you.
From cradle to grave.
And how's it paid for? You pay for by printing more money.
You got to print more money. But can you go get a loan, Mark?
The only problem with the only problem with printing more money is that your commodities increase in price. So instead of bread being $1, it's now $5, and soon it'll be $6, $8, $9, $10, $15, $20. So as you print money, the price of everything goes up. You shift into the government sector. It's kind of nice because people have security, but in the end, people will be much, much poorer. If you look at every system that relies on government redistribution, the society at large, the per capita,
a key word, redistribution.
Yeah,
is that where this is going?
The per capita income is always much lower than you would if you had a robust kind of private enterprise.
I got to tell you, Mark, it's a change. I believed I was raised in a capitalist society. I believe it's been turned into something else, but I still see hope.
Well, but the thing
hope,
is, which
hope is there, and I don't mean hope and change. I
no,
mean,
but,
I think there's hope.
but I think you're missing the point. See, it used to be if you wanted to do charity, if you wanted to do the right thing, you relied on your conscience and people shaming you doing the right thing. But now the government has guns, and they're making sure you do the right thing under the threat of force.
Okay,
so
well,
that's a much better thing.
That brings us our whole show together. And I wanted to thank you again for joining us on Law Talk. And Mark, thank you for your evening, and I wish everybody a Happy New Year. This is our January show. Okay. And I would like to say this. Be aware, and we'll do it right. Thanks, Mark.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.